we're very, very lucky to have Dr. Anita Collins to come along and speak with us today. And everybody is just so excited, Anita, with the research you've put forward. And we've been talking about our bigger, better brains. We're so proud of ourselves for doing it.
I'm so glad you had a good time.
We did. We did learn so much, and it was just really great to meet with a whole heap of other music educators, and not just piano teachers. We had a whole heap of early music educators, and we had a little kinder music crowd there, and we had teachers in schools crowd, and some piano teachers, and all sorts of people come along. So it was just fabulous.
Great.
So much. I just sort of want to track right back to the very beginning and ask, what led you to just do this study that you've done?
Honestly, it was the fact that I had always wanted to do a PhD, but I was kind of pushed to do it. So I went to work at university when I had a master's, and that was perfectly fine. But then they changed the rules, so I had to have a PhD. So they helped us to start doing a PhD. And I got two pieces of advice. The first was choose something that is so well researched that, you know, you've got so much to pull from and you're really only just tinkering around the edges. And the second one was to choose something that you would love as much at the end as you did at the beginning. And that was very much what I chose to do. And that makes it a lot harder, but it also makes it a lot more fulfilling as an experience, because it's a really long road. It's such a long road to do it. So, yeah, and I read for about 9 months. I read everything I could. And I just waited for that one moment of spark to go, oh, I love this. And then weirdly enough, it happened in a strange way. I read an article about someone who does a similar job to me right back when the field started. And he was talking to 4 neuroscientists. And he said, if you had a group of music educators in front of you, what do you think they should know about your work? And so I kept reading and reading and reading and reading and reading. And I got to the end and I went, I don't need to know any of that stuff, but I need to know this and this and this and this and this. So that's what I interpreted as my spark to go, look, I would love to go into this field to figure out what music teachers need to know so they can teach better. So that was the start.
I knew you absolutely have started on that, having done your your advocacy course. And I think one of the things that was, which harks back to your first criteria, which is a period of work that it's actually been, or that there's a lot of work out there. And I think you told us that it's been going for, was it 20 to 30 years?
Yeah, it depends. It's always like where do you pinpoint that it starts? But it's between 25 and 30 years now, which is usually the point where you start to get some really solid research. Research takes a very long time. You have to explore and test and retest and do lots of different things. So they're kind of getting to this point where we're getting some very large randomized studies, and that's the gold standard in research, and that's what we're looking for. So I've been really lucky. I kind of got in close to the start of it, and then I've got to follow it all the way through and see the exciting things happen and see the naysayers and really get involved in it. So it's been a really wonderful journey, and I really do think the next 5 years is the golden period of when we're going to see fantastic results coming up.
And you've even been, I think you were saying to us, where they put the tell us about that.
So when I go and visit the labs, I talk to all the researchers, and I talk to everyone from like the research assistant who helps the kids get set up with their EEG caps through to the professors who run the whole lab. But the other thing I do is I do all the tests. Every test they'll let me do, I will do it. So I've been in a full motion capture suit, just like Gollum from Lord of the Rings. And they tested how my brain talked to my body and my body talked to my brain when I was dancing. And I've done as many as they possibly would let me do, mainly to understand the study and what they're trying to do, but also just see how it feels. What's it like to be in these studies, and what is it like when you deal with kids in these studies as well? Yeah,
exactly. And actually, I love your that just made me think about, I just saw just today, one where you've got my corpus callosum is really big, and you've got these really great kids doing stuff, and my brain's making fireworks or something like that.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to give kids in particular some words for what's happening inside their brains. I think that's the bit that's resonated the most, is giving us ways of thinking about what's happening inside our brains rather than making it really technical. It's like, well, you know, what's a metaphor for what's going on? And yeah, it's worked really well. And the kids love knowing what's happening inside their brains when they're learning. They're fascinated by it. And
the other thing you've just, I mean, we're just going back to your whirlwind. Oh, it seems to me to be a whirlwind thing, but it sounds like it's for you. It's been a very long. Yeah. So, I mean, gosh, Don't Stop the Music was just absolutely fabulous. And then there's a TED talk that I see that you did, and I've watched, and your animated things. So what came first in all of this? Like, it seems, you just seems to have burst onto our
no, it hasn't been burst. It's been a really slow slog. The first thing was the research itself, and then I put a suggestion into TED Education about an animated film, and they make these amazing films. And they went through the process of accepting it, and then saying, and then I worked with an animator, and I worked with a fact checker. And then we went through the process. I didn't realize till afterwards how quick my particular process was, but also how, I don't know, how so many people put in a pitch and they never get through. So again, it's an amazing thing.
How long was that process? It sounds still a pretty long process.
It's only about 4 months, which is super quick apparently. Apparently most of them take 9 or 10. And they told me afterwards, they said they get 350 pitches a week. Wow. They interview 5 people every Friday, and out of the 5 they pick 1.
Wow.
So it's amazing. And they also said that the particular one I made doesn't it's had the most take up straight away. Like, it was just shot around the world really, really quickly, whereas a lot of them take a while
You went viral, darling.
Yeah, I went viral. But I just think it means that so many people are interested in this. This is fascinating to people all over the world, and that means that it's an area that we want to know more about. So how do we share that information in ways that people can kind of grapple with and understand? And I think from that, I was identified as a possibility for a TEDx talk. And that came around, and then I met with the Canberra people and did that one, and then it's since gone on to the major TED site itself.
Awesome.
Which is really good. And again, it's sort of espousing, what's my idea worth sharing? And that's all that TED is about. And I think what was hardest at that point is to go, well, how big do I dream? And what can we accomplish as a group of teachers? And that was really important to get that right. And I keep resonating back to what I said then and knowing that was the right thing for me. So it's been a whirlwind, and then Don't Stop the Music and all sorts of other things. So
because you got a pretty big dream.
Yeah. It's very simple.
Very simple. Very simple. But big.
I just want to show how it can benefit all of us. And how it can change the lives of so many children, but also it can change us. It will mould our society. If every child had music education from birth, it would fundamentally mould the new Australia or any country into something very, very different, and I think a lot better. But we've got to try it out and see. And I'm just making the argument for that. Well,
we've still got a heck of a lot. When you think about music, and you say this in your training. It was one of the it's been, how long has music been with us? It's an ancient part of our brain. It comes from an ancient part of our brain. It's an ancient part of our...
music is our first language. We had it before we had speech. And thinking of it that way, it's like it's one of the 4 things that set off the internal reward network. Like, that's how fundamental it is to us as human beings. So to be where it is in our current thinking, and to be where it is in our current curriculums and things like that, it doesn't really reflect us as human beings. So how can we update ourselves on where music should sit in every child's life?
And you're working with a number of education departments.
So all of the South Australian Department of Education have a music education strategy, which is absolutely extraordinary to have something that is so brave and so big, but also they have agreed ahead of time that whoever gets into government will continue the strategy.
Oh,
now that means it doesn't revolve on like on an electoral cycle.
Yes, which has happened before. We got very, very close to a wonderful take-up, and then there was a change of government and nationally, and then it just all fell in a great big heap, which is, and so now it's taken this new take-up to get this sort of thing going again.
And I think a new way of thinking about music and where it sits with for every child, and also a new way of understanding what benefits it brings besides the musical ones. And I think there's a lot of the research has come to that point where, you know, state departments of education are really starting to think about it. And that means we're, you know, and we're ahead of a lot of other countries in that way. So I think we're on the crest of a wave, and we just need to keep pushing it along in our own places.
And I think you've worked a little bit with Queensland government too, is that right?
Yep, there's very few governments I haven't worked with. But I've worked with anything from a single school trying to change their school via music education, and then I've worked through with like a Catholic diocese, which are, you know, huge areas, through to whole states. So it's been, I can see that there are places that are really ready to move and to look at the long term.
That's fantastic. It's really good. I think anybody who saw the Don't Stop the Music program is just, I mean, other than, you know, your research absolutely proves it as well, but it was just compelling, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And it told us, I was trying to figure out because when we went through the process, they, at the ABC, they went, well, we don't think this will be as interesting as some of our other things because it's music and it's kids and, you know, not that interesting to everybody. Some people are very engaged, but some people won't be. And what got me is that it was taken up by the Australian public and loved by the Australian public far more than some of the programs they were comparing it to. And it got me thinking about why. And the two things are, it's not about music, it's about children. And children are our next generation, and everyone's interested in that. And the other thing was, we showed the process behind the music making. We didn't just show the excitement at the start and then the final performance. We showed the messy middle. And the messy middle is where you fall in love with the kids. And when you fall in love with their process and how hard they're trying and when they fail, and that's okay. So I think we need to do more of that. We need to show the process, and we need to value the process as the place where the magic actually happens. It's not, you know, when you're performing on a stage, it's all the stuff that comes before it.
And I think in the, you know, over that weekend that we spent with you, I think that the other messy middle you talked about that had really probably even more value to it than the end result of that concert performance was the actual preparing for, I mean, this messy middle can apply to the beginning of the first day I get that instrument in my hand to a successful performance, but it also can be from one performance to another performance in that messy middle. And I just love that one where you thought, oh my goodness, we don't have, for some reason you didn't have a piece ready, and so you decided to immerse your parents within the whole thing. Could you tell us about that a bit? Yeah,
sure. I take a lot of concert bands, so when I'm still a practicing teacher and will remain so as long as I possibly can. But we were getting ready for a really big concert, for one of those really, you know, the one concert a year you do that's really the highlight of everything. And it was all going fine, and then everyone got the flu. Every kid got sick. But the problem is I had about 6 rehearsals in a row where I had 15 kids away each time, but it was a different 15 kids. So it's just, we couldn't get there. And the second last rehearsal, when you try and run everything through, and we went, we can't do it. We just can't. So we decided to flip the concert around so that it became a lot about explaining to the parents what had happened in the process, how we dealt with it. I got the kids to talk about how they felt about not being ready. And then we did play sections of the pieces, but we played them only in sections, and we kind of prepared the parents beforehand and said, you know, we're listening out for how the balance is happening here, or we're not quite up to tempo yet, but we're doing a bit slower. So we kind of took the parents through the process. And I've never had more emails after a concert just saying, that was incredible. I learned so much. I never understood what my child was doing. It was by accident, but it taught me a huge amount about how we need to show what's going on behind the rehearsal room door or the practice room door.
Absolutely. And also that it just starts to key the parents into the value of this isn't just whether I practiced, you know, or did half an hour. Who does a half an hour? No one does a half an hour practice, by the way. If you've read Dr. Macpherson's study about how many hours of practice is done a week, like, it's not happening. But anyway, so that they, oh yes, will drop out, you know, because of whatever reason. And the reason, and just how compelling it is to not drop out.
Yeah.
All of this other stuff that goes in.
Yeah, and being able to, I think as music teachers, we struggle, we know it's happening, but we don't often name it. Yeah. And we don't often have words to explain to a parent that, you know, it's really great they're struggling because they're learning this, this and this, you know, resilience, yes. And they're learning how to deal with frustration. They're learning how to find their way through their own emotional reaction, and how do they find what happens when it actually goes right, and to recognize that little spark of, oh, I got it. How do we use words with our parents about that and explain what's happening, and that actually keeping them in the frustrating place is good, even though as a parent you desperately don't like watching it. You're actually doing something good for your child. And I think
I remember that one of those key phrases was being comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Yeah. And in a first world country, you know, there are kids that are really doing it hard for sure, but on the whole, our kids don't have to experience too much discomfort. No. And they're not learning an important life skill through that. So we've got to figure out different ways to put it in. And music wraps it up in a bow. Music is discomfort every single day, but only little bits, like microdosing on discomfort.
Yes. And as a parent of two boys, I know how uncomfortable I am when they're just with their discomfort, because we just want them to be okay.
I know. We just want to say, stop, don't do that anymore. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't matter, but it actually really does. And I think in many cases parents need to be given permission to let them sit in that, but also it's important for us as parents to talk about how uncomfortable we feel and how much we want them to stop, but how we know it's best for them. And I think all that is an open conversation.
Yes. And also that you as a teacher are happy with them being, in fact, want them to, you know, live in that little bit of discomfort anyway, because I think the parent just wants them to be, you know, to tick the boxes and be okay and what have you. And they're worried about what you'll think of them. Yeah. If they're not.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why it needs to be, we need to think about the three people in the experience, which is the parents, the student and the teacher as well. And how do we create this safe place around the student for them to fail and learn? And how do we also create a safe space for both the teacher to get frustrated sometimes and the parents to get frustrated and worried, but also know that it's okay. And I think we have a privileged position. We get to be so important in these students' lives. And we get to, in many cases, be a very, very constant adult, or, you know, as constant as sort of an aunt or an uncle, for example.
Yes.
And it's important that we recognise that, so that it's an ongoing relationship over years, and how do we build that so that we can talk about the hard stuff and the great stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Paul has a burning question that he wants to ask. Paul, do you want to ask your question?
I do. Hi, Anita.
Hello.
I was listening to your interview with Anita Holman in, I think she's in Britain somewhere. It could be in Wales. And you said, you know what? Orph and Kadai really knew what they were doing. Why?
Well, what was interesting to me is when I went through the research, and as a music teacher, I was really interested in what was in the music interventions. And what an intervention is basically a music program. You know, how were they teaching music? Whether it was on an instrument or singing or whatever. And when you start reading across all the research, I started to put together what are the ingredients of a music education that has cognitive benefits. Because you can have a music education that doesn't. And I said, what are the things that need to be put together? And it was really funny. The three that come to mind straight away is there needs to be an instrument, there needs to be singing, and there needs to be moving. And if I look at any great Kadai or Orph inspired classroom, that's what's involved. And it's kind of like, a lot of this research is not telling us how to teach music differently. It's actually supporting and making us understand why the stuff that Kadayanov, sort of did methodology, and a lot of teaching before Kadayanov had as some of their ingredients, especially with younger children. It's about why it works. We've always known it works, but we've figured it out through trial and error. We've just got a whole bunch of neuroscientists who are now saying, oh, and this is why it works. So yeah, it's about, it has these ingredients in it, and the instrument, the singing and the moving is really, really important, very prevalent when we teach younger kids, but it kind of gets lost in a couple of different places. I'm a concert band conductor. There is, in traditional pedagogy, in the traditional way you take a concert band, there's no singing and there's definitely no moving. We sit and we play and we have a conductor, but where's the singing, where's the moving? And it was one of the things I did as a little experiment, to have more singing in my concert band than playing, and we do lots and lots of moving as well. And that it was a revelation to me, because now I don't have to worry about tuning with these kids, because if they can't sing it, they can't play it, and I get them to sing it in tune and they play it in tune. So it's just really simple, but wouldn't have thought about it beforehand.
Exactly, and that's the same with so many pedagogies. Certainly, as a piano teacher, and we at Forte School of Music, we use what we call whole body learning, which is a combination of Delcros, Elf, and Kadai. And teachers have to move and sing, and the children move and sing, and the results are amazing. And we've just been doing a lot of work with teachers on using that strategy, because traditional piano teachers and all instrumental teachers will put the music up in front of their student, and they all sit down and they play it, and read and play, which is far from being an awful Kadai or Delcros approach.
Yeah.
And we've always said, if you can sing, you can play it.
Exactly. I mean, piano is such an interesting particular pedagogy, because it's also traditionally taught, it's a solo instrument. Whereas when we've got orchestra, when we've got choir, when we've got concert band, at least you're in this social learning situation. But when I think back, I always think, okay, what's the lived experience? Like, I had 12 years of clarinet learning, up into university and stuff, and that was with 2 or 3 individual teachers. Who else has 12 years of training on something before they even get to university? So we've had a long time to be enculturated into a certain way of learning. And it's very hard to get out of that. It's very hard. You have to consciously make a choice to teach differently, often to the way you were taught yourself. And absolutely. I think that's what's both the challenge, but oh my goodness, such an incredible reward. When you can reach every kid. That's the thing. Traditional ways of teaching only reach certain kinds of students. When you can start to reach every child, then that becomes an incredible experience, both for the kids and for the teacher.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the whole, because with a lot of instrumental music teaching, piano included, there really isn't a lot of pedagogical training, formal in a degree course. Sometimes people might do one subject of pedagogy for one time, but they might actually spend most of their life, rather than performing, they actually spend it actually teaching. And so therefore we go, okay, how will I approach this? And so the only thing we have is our original, how we were taught to go on. And that's what we can scaffold on, because it's all the thing. That's what makes sense to us, doesn't it? But so it's about now, and I think there's one of the exciting things is that a lot of more pedagogical ideas are coming forward and are more easily taken up now, and which is really great.
And it's particular to Australia, Australian university training as well. If you went to the States and even to Canada as well, they do understand that someone can go into a performance degree, but will do a big chunk of their work as a teacher. So they have very, very stringent sort of pedagogical
that's good.
sort of courses, which is really great. So it'd be interesting, like, how do we manage that in Australia when we have a particular way of teaching performers? And then a particular way of teaching music educators for the classroom. Where does the instrumental teacher sit in that, and how can they continue to develop their pedagogy over time, and that in many cases becomes about continued professional development. But that's so deliberate. You have to really go, right, this year I'm going to focus on this. But it gives so much back, and it's really, we get to choose our training. So when training does come up, it's really important that we take it, because there's not a huge amount.
No, exactly. There isn't. So tell us about the Bigger, Better Trains advocacy training. So we did that one. And, and because we just touched on it before, you've got big plans.
Yes.
World domination. Was that what it was?
How hard can it be? So Bigger, Better Brains was actually the title of my thesis. And it came from, I was reading all this research and I kept scribbling in the corner going, musicians' brains are bigger, musicians' brains are better. And what's come out of that is it's a 3-level course, and you guys were part of the first level, the educator course. So I strongly believe that traditional advocacy, as in just telling people why music is good, doesn't actually work. It doesn't resonate with them, and for me it doesn't turn on the light behind their eyes, and that's what we're looking for. So I believe our superpower is to educate people. So let's use that in order to kind of do advocacy by stealth. So the 2 days are, the first 2 days are absolutely throwing all the research at you, as you would have at the end of the first day. I'm sure your brain was pretty sore. But then the second day is all about how do you apply it in your own teaching space. And that could be anything, like you said, it's an incredible experience. We've got anything, you could be sitting next to a head of department in a Catholic school, and who's sitting next to an early childhood teacher in a private centre, who's sitting next to someone else who is a saxophone teacher across 5 schools. It's an incredible group of people who come together and sort of apply the research into the space where they are. So that's the first step. And this next step, which starts next year, is those educators get to go on, if they would like to, and become a facilitator. And that's the bit I'm really excited about, because it means you can start to go out and run professional development sessions for your staff. You can start to figure out how you speak to your parents, what's the best way to do it, how you talk to, say, a funder or a principal about starting a new program or changing something. It's about how do we apply the research. Research is useless if it's only on a page. It needs to be used in our classrooms and in our studios. So that's the next step. And then there's up there a leader course, which are people who can go out and be the world domination people. That's my plan.
That's good. It's a simple plan, but a simple plan is always good. And so have you got any, I'm not sure whether you've got any more ones this year. I think it's all
one more this year in Brisbane.
Yes.
Which is going to be exciting. Yeah. And so we ran 5 this year, and we really didn't know what people would think. But they sold out incredibly quickly. And then so next year we're going to run either 12 or 13. So there's a lot, and we will also be going overseas next year as well. There's a lot of interest from overseas. So it's really wonderful to think that we can bring music educators from all around the world together, who've all had this training and can all start to talk about how they're improving their practice through, brain-based learning.
Yes. And I think sometimes with some of these movements, it started from a little level and gone really straight up to the top levels, straight as a way of trying to get the top level sorted and filter down. Yeah. I think to some extent you're doing that, but you're sort of doing both ways really, because you really are educating this groundswell of people also just start talking to people. So you've got a much bigger base that hopefully we have a revolution on our hands.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the other thing is I like the idea that we're going to connect people from all over Australia and then all over the world who have the same kind of interest as the TED Ed. These are these people who would have watched the TED Ed video and gone, that's really interesting, I want to know more. Now we're actually bringing them together, but bringing them together in such a way that they really can share how they're using the research, and it becomes suddenly real. And that's what's the most important thing to me, is that while I have a fascination with this, it's no use if it all lives with me. It's got to go out and it's got to be used by other people and tested out and learnt and grown and all that sort of stuff. So I strongly believe every movement needs to start from the bottom, and it starts with the music teachers in their studios with their, the one student they haven't been able to reach, and then suddenly they do the course and they understand what's going on in that kid's brain. Yes. And that's gold for me.
Yes, exactly. And I think with the Bigger Better Brains training, it was just so nice. As you said, it brought, a early childhood educator with a head of department, with a instrumental teacher, one-to-one private type teacher, a school, a band program leaders, or everything, to a classroom music teacher. It brought all of these people together. Yeah. But everyone, it was such a wonderful feeling because everybody was united with their absolute desire and passion for this, and that we knew it anyway. But it's so nice to get that validation and those little key, findings and facts, and to know what they are. Because a lot of us we've heard little bits and pieces over the years, but to be updated to where the research is at now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's part of it. I mean, the moments I love in every single course is when I hear a teacher go, that's why that works. It's like, yes, because the more conscious we are of what works and why it works, and then we can really focus on that and tweak it and make it even better. Yes. And they're the moments that I teach for, basically, to know that. And the stories that are starting to come back are absolutely incredible. Like, when you say world domination, it's not actually a joke. It's more about saying we need to dream bigger than we are currently. We need to go, look, all I can do, I want a music program that looks like this. All I can do is ask. And what's happened for a couple of teachers have come back already and said, I put a proposal together. I used all the brain research to support it. And my principal said yes. And now they're sort of going, oh my God, now I've got to do it. but they got through the door, and that's what it's for. To get through the door, to help others to understand what it is that we understand so intuitively. We do so intuitively. We don't have the language for. It's to get us to have the language to actually explain it to someone else. It's got no point of reference. They've never played an instrument. Their child's never played an instrument. They don't understand the value.
And I think there was a lot of talk, and I'm sure each training might have some slightly different emphasis than others, but there was certainly huge emphasis on the causative effect of music with language, and that in the schools are really big time into we've got to get this language thing sorted, because NAPLAN showed that actually we are doing worse than what we were doing in the very beginnings. Is that right?
Yeah.
And that one of the discussion points was around, certainly or themes perhaps, was around, gosh, if they just did a really good music program in there, maybe they wouldn't need as much on the rainbow readers and all of these other expensive literacy programs, and it's fun.
Yeah.
It adds other things with the executive function, all these other things that we have with it as well.
Yeah. And that's that idea that we can, again, if it starts right from the beginning, even before language and reading comes into it, we're actually priming their brain for that process. It's a reading particularly is an incredibly cognitive taxing task. And there's a big question of, are our kids cognitively ready for that task when they're 5 years of age? And sometimes the kids aren't. But we can use music both to help speed that process up, but we can also help use that process, music, to identify where a problem might be and how we can then help them. So it becomes this complementary activity to basic child development. And I think it's so important. Kids have only got kindy 1 and 2 to really get reading under control, because after that they're actually using reading to learn. And if they've missed that window, then we know now through NAPLAN that they will constantly be behind, and that has flow-on effects that are incredibly numerous. And we don't want that to happen. If we can put a music program in that it would just be standard, would just be singing and moving in an instrument and reading music and all those sorts of things, it would just be very, very typical of a good music program. We don't know what the benefits would be for every kid, but we know it will benefit them in different kinds of ways. And how can we step away or walk away or not recognise that opportunity that we might be missing?
Absolutely. So that and other more fascinating stuff, Anita covers off in the Bigger Better Brains training. So we're going to put on a little slide, we're going to put how you can log on and save your place, because I must say, I tried to get into Queensland, Brisbane, and I think it sold out within 4 days or something.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
Brisbane was really quick.
So I had to go to Sydney to do mine, which was good, which is fine. It was really great to do. But yeah, so get in quick is what I say. Get in quick or you'll miss out.
I'm looking forward to seeing everybody. It's such an amazing experience. And I think we need teachers from everywhere to come along so that they can go back to the work that they do and make it even better.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure to have you. You're the talk of the town. Everybody wants to talk to Anita. And I'm so grateful that you came onto our program. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.